Good morning, refined investors. Hope you're having a great Monday. In fact, it has not been a very good Monday for investors in the stock market. But, that doesn't mean you can't dress nice, put a blazer on, suit yourself up, fix yourself. Remember, being a refined investor does not only mean being smart with your assets, but also being smart with yourself, being smart with your health, with your appearance. All these things do matter because, in fact, you have an image. That's kind of important, right? Especially if you're a professional in the world, you need to look like it. Anyhow, having said that, we're going to talk a little bit about how the stock market is reacting, but more importantly, let's talk specifically about crypto and why crypto is acting kind of strange these last couple of years, and more so this year, and more so as the months progress. We're starting to see something evolve within the crypto industry, specifically as it pertains to decoupling from one another. And that's a really great topic because I think many people are still not sure why one does this and the other does that, and what does it mean to you as an investor. So let's get to this. Let's start a little bit. Let's give a little bit of a background. Most people think that crypto markets move as one big herd, and that's true. Bitcoin pumps, the altcoins pump. Bitcoin dumps, the altcoins bleed, and there you have it. It's a cycle, and everybody just says, "Oh, we're okay with that." Today, we're breaking down how Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP. We're just going to refer to those three because those three are really the top three in market cap, and it's important to focus on them because they also each represent a very unique market position, right? A sort of like a vertical, if you will. And so let's talk about that. Part one is really about why crypto still does, in fact, look like at the very least, and for the most part, move together. They move in tandem with each other, whether it's in the upward direction or downward direction. Maybe not at the same exact percentages, but in fact, it's still happening. But before we talk about decoupling, the simple answer is liquidity and psychology is what really causes them to still move in tandem, right? Bitcoin controls the majority of the inflows of digital assets. It's the gateway, right? It's been the gateway drug since 2009. And as such, people really trust it and feel like whatever it does represents sort of like the greater market. And so when Bitcoin moves, it sets the market sentiment, the emotions. Remember, altcoins are really an emotional purchase. People get excited about it, whereas in Bitcoin, it's still the more traditional, institutional grade. It's why people feel like it's digital gold. And so for that reason, it's the leader. And so now moving into what does it mean to decouple, right? Because we hear these phrases in crypto and in the stock market in general, very loose terms, right? Well, decoupling actually means that the crypto assets begin to act like separate asset classes. They each represent something unique and have characteristics that could separate them from one another. They're not correlated tech bets anymore, right? Instead of everything flowing or following Bitcoin's narrative, you start to see each asset respond to its own fundamentals, its own adoption curve, and its own legal and technological catalysts. And so let's talk a little bit about the Bitcoin's unique catalyst because it is the king and it deserves just sort of like attention to what those catalysts are. So, what could cause Bitcoin to break away from the pack, which we've seen when we talk about dominance, right? Institutional adoption and ETFs comes the first thing that come to mind. It's taken the lion's share, right? And it makes total sense with game players like BlackRock involved and what have you. Bitcoin is becoming basically a macro asset compared to, let's say, gold and bonds. And also regulatory clarity pushes it further, right? It's become sort of like becoming, I should say, a part of like mainstream portfolios. And that's something even you hear Larry Fink talk about how Bitcoin needs to be 1 to 2 to 5% of your portfolio if, he says, you feel as if you're losing value in your currency, you're losing purchasing power, you're concerned, if you're worried, right? He's passing it on like only if you're worried, not to be worried. And then, of course, you got the halving cycles, right? Bitcoin's program supply shock is unique to BTC. No other crypto has this level of predictable scarcity that Bitcoin has. And that's another reason why it should and act separately and differently. You've also got geopolitical demand for a neutral store of value. And Bitcoin benefits the most from inflation fears, currency instability, and sovereign hedging, of course. Now let's talk a bit about Ethereum, right? Ethereum's unique catalysts. What are they? Well, Ethereum can decouple, right, based on utility and economic activity, rather than being seen as Bitcoin's tech cousin. Here's what separates Ethereum, and this is how I see it, of course, and a lot of it is true, of course. It's not just opinion from, let's say, Bitcoin. Ethereum supply dynamics after the merge with staking and burn mechanisms, ETH behaves more like a yield-bearing asset with potential deflation, right? So that does make it appealing as an investment vehicle. You also have the real world utilization, right? The tokenization of real world assets, which we've heard Larry Fink talk about in addition to this being floated around Wall Street quite a bit lately. So institutions want to tokenize the bonds, real estate, and assets. And most are choosing to do so on Ethereum or they're L2s, right? So you've got Polygon, you got all these L2s, Arbitrum, you got them, and they may play also a significant role in sort of working with the Ethereum network, right, in achieving sort of the real world asset tokenization. And then you got smart contract dominance. Well, what does that mean? It means that over 70% of decentralized applications live on Ethereum or the roll-ups built from it. That's not a small number. That's the majority. It's got the lion's share from that perspective, and it should not be taken lightly. XRP's unique catalysts are different and very powerful. So we wanted to keep this as part of the conversation. XRP decouples from completely different reasons than Bitcoin and Ethereum. Regulatory and banking sector driven reasons, to be specific. Legal clarity, number one. XRP is one of the few major assets with partially clarified U.S. legal status, as we all know about the lawsuit with the SEC that ran since 2021. And so that's a big deal, right? It separates it from many of the altcoins that still haven't achieved that level of clarity from the government. Cross-border settlement adoption, right? So we know that one thing that's really been a sort of an issue for currencies has been the slowness and just exhaustive nature and the cost, right? The prohibitive cost of moving money cross border. Well, XRP solves that, right? And it's already partnered with over 300 banks, not to mention all its great acquisitions that sort of bring the world all together and make XRP look really, really attractive. So from the cross-border settlement perspective, if banks and remittance providers scale up tokenized payments or on-demand liquidity, XRP moves on enterprise utility, not retail hype. Also, we've got the ISO 20222 narrative, right? The 222. Whether justified or not, the belief that XRP will integrate with financial messaging systems drives a unique investor base that doesn't mirror Bitcoin cycles. And so those are really important points to hold for XRP, because we want to see how those points evolve, right? We know we're getting closer and closer. Everybody can feel it in the air. I know the XRP army is there. They're always, this is why XRP is great. This is what it's going to achieve. All true, but it's got to come into real life, right? We want to see it in full live motion. And of course, you've got other things where, for example, MasterCard and XRP or Ripple are testing stablecoin, sort of like they're demoing and testing, how payments are settled, how things work, sort of, and that's on the XRP ledger, of course. So all of these are major catalysts. And what's funny is that everybody wants to see these things overnight. You're talking about revolutionizing. It's a once in 100-year situation where an opportunity where systems are being rebuilt from the ground up, and XRP is in fact that system. So now let's talk about when exactly can we expect this decoupling to happen. Decoupling isn't a single moment, right? I told you these things take time. It's a process, right? It happens in phases, just as I mentioned with XRP. You've got one step after another. It's all carefully, methodically thought through. This isn't just something that's irrationally done. So the phase one of this sort of decoupling will be short-term, decorrelation. How do they decorrelate? ETH pumps on tech upgrades, XRP pumps on lawsuits, or winning of lawsuits, I should say, and BTC holds steady. It's just been how the nature of it works. The second phase is going to be really the cyclical decoupling. What does that mean? Bitcoin moves on macro factors like ETH moves on network demand, right? Again, very technical and very specific to each one of them. And then the third phase is structural decoupling, right? And this is when each crypto becomes its own distinct asset class, as we talked about at the very beginning, with its own investors, valuation, models, and catalysts. So it's all this use case talk, right? When each one has a very well-defined use case. this is when we begin to see true separation and decoupling, among all these valuable cryptos and altcoins and Bitcoin, of course. What could force the breaking point here? This is really important to point out. The true breaking point comes when the market stops lumping crypto together, right? We have to have that moment when the market is mature enough to say, I get it now. I'm educated enough, the market is educated enough now to understand the difference between these. And it starts to value these assets the way they deserve to be valued. Bitcoin as digital gold, Ethereum as a decentralized infrastructure for global finance and apps, XRP as a settlement and liquidity platform for institutions. So those are the three that I really wanted to focus on. So the days of Bitcoin up, everything up are numbered. I believe that. I'm sure many of you believe that. I think the market generally has that sentiment. And the investors who understand decoupling early will see the opportunities others will miss. I don't want you to be that person who misses it, because we're living in those times where it could happen, and phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3 will sort of like just be there, right? Because steps have been taken, and by the time you know it, these light switches are just going on 1, 2, 3, and I want you to be able to reap the rewards because you're positioned in the right ones at the right time. If you want more deep dives like this, hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know which crypto you believe will decouple first. Welcome again to the Refined Investor, and I'll see you guys in the next one.